health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcasts on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of a like-minded group to support you on your journey, in addition to truly taking control of your health. My goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So please help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help, especially this one. Teri Cochrane is back. She's a dedicated clinician, advisor, and speaker, the amazing author of The Wildatarian Diet. Welcome back, Teri. How are you?
Hi, Sara. So good to see you again.
For everyone listening, there's just a very handful of people, not even a full handful of my mentors, of the people that I really respect and go, they know what they're talking about. And Teri is one of those 3 people. So this is a treat for me as well. And I'm going to be asking my selfish questions as much as trying to give the information to you. But today we're talking about a topic that I am so passionate about because it's affecting not just family members, but the kids. And when it hits the kids, that's what hits my heart, because I'm a mom of 3 and it's a tough job. As Teri's a mom and she's seen it, and then they become adult children, and it's not just about diapers and feeding them, it's about emotional support. And we're going to be talking about how to improve mood and behavior naturally. And this is a topic hitting everybody. So Teri, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing parents that are suffering themselves with anxiety and depression. And so they don't even have the energy to deal with their kids. And then they put the kids on the medication because they don't know what to do. And the feedback I'm getting from the teachers are that these kids have no coping skills. There's no tools that are given to them. And there's so many threats that are coming in at us. We've got the social media and addiction. We've got the spike protein. We've got the toxicity. We've got Bill Gates taking over the farmlands and the food supply. I mean, we're talking about the healthy foods that are not so healthy anymore. So many things to cover in such little time with you. So where do we start, Teri?
Wow. Well, it is quite a topic. And right before we went on air, Sara, I was sharing with you that the client right before this broadcast is a client whose son has been hospitalized for 3 weeks with a mood disorder because he was significantly violent at home. He now has a police record. Now he's 14 years old, and this child, which every medical professional has missed, is suffering from PANDAS. This is pediatric autoimmune psychiatric disorder, where these kids become homicidal or suicidal. So yes, this has become epidemic. The pandemic has ripped away our socialization skills, our ability to be in community, our family construct. What we're now more insular. I don't know how we're going to come back to being back in full community. So let's try to dissect this on so many levels. We've got the spike protein that turns on all sorts of pathogens. Now we know it's clinically shown that turns on Epstein-Barr. It's reigniting Lyme. Lyme has been tied to PANDAS. It's dysregulating insulin, and turning on the histamine response. So let's just break those down even further. All right. Starting with reactivation of viral loads, in particular, Epstein-Barr, varicella, and the herpes family of viruses. When that happens, it hits the pituitary, which is our air traffic control for neurotransmitters. It hits the thyroid. So metabolically, we're really tired. It hits neurologically. So it can make us very anxious. It's been linked to a lot of mood disorders. Then we have the issue with the histamine response. It's turning on the histamine receptor gene. That makes us anxious. It makes us ADHD. It makes us manic, in the sense that the histamine response will then turn on other pathogens of strep and candida that dysregulate serotonin and dopamine. So the spike protein alone has had massive downstream impacts. These kids are hypoglycemic. They're high in histamine. They're carrying around strep and candida. And by the way, strep is rampant now with this latest variant. Strep in particular is linked to pediatric autoimmune psychiatric disorder. And then we have the tearing of the fabric of the social construct. All right, so how do we untangle all of that? The very first thing is we have to get kids out of their computer programs and back to reading a book, back to going outside, because if you don't calm the body first, none of this the trajectory for getting all this balance is going to be a lot more difficult. Yeah. I understand that parents are exhausted and don't have the bandwidth themselves, but even spending 5 minutes outside with your child, sitting on the grass, touching a real leaf, going wherever you live in whatever you are in the country. If you're living in a rural area, go look at the cows. If you're living by the water, go put your feet in the sand. If you're living in the mountains, go sit on some rocks. Go collect rocks. Go collect things that come from nature. The way that we're going to get out of it is we've got to get back to living as nature intended. And that is turning down the volume on our nervous system response, first and foremost.
It's so true. But how do you really do that, Teri? I mean, how do you really tell your kid who is addicted to social media? And by the way, you are as well, because most adults are looking at it, right? And we were, during the pandemic, we were all isolated at home and we had free content on our computers and our devices, porn, gambling, and the social media, let alone the fact that the alcohol and the sugar and processed foods are right in the room next to me, instead of I'm at an office and I brought my sack lunch, or I'm going to have my one meal out. But you've got all of these things, and the dopamine has lowered. Our dopamine is totally dysregulated, which gets dysregulated again with the processed foods. Absolutely. And processed foods. I was having this conversation with a mom. Thank God my kids are old and I don't have to worry about this as much. But when you've got elementary school kids and they're going to school, and birthdays every week, and cupcakes and processed foods that you don't have control over, and that's normal, right? So these are the normal things that are coming at us. And I can tell you, my kids were not normal, and they were ostracized to some extent because they were eating healthier food. And it was actually just real food, where the processed food isn't real food. So there's all of these things. But what I'm hoping that people understand going forward is that you don't want to be normal. You don't want to fit in that box, because you're going to quickly have disease, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I've dealt with my 3 children. All have had ups and downs emotionally and mood issues. And they are wonderful, stable kids, right? So they shouldn't be the kids with mood disorders, but they did. And they've created a way to get out of it because they got coping skills, and they connected the dots with food and supplements and what and that impact body, mind, and spirit, and how they're all connected. And I mean, the wild thing, the wild meats. The one thing that has been great with the pandemic is that there are so many more ranches around the country that are delivering right to your doorstep. And I had Sean Grace on my show from North Star Bison. And if you saw the packaging that delivers on your door, you go, oh my gosh, was this shipping like $300? Because it's so professionally done and the food's phenomenal. So those types of things are there. The healthier foods are out there. You just have to look and be a little more proactive. So when we're talking about the mind-body experience, and people think about anxiety and depression and mood, and you think, oh, well, it's just in their head, right? Can you talk about the connection between the nutrition and the brain and the gut and how that is all connected? So first we need to get out in nature. We need to touch the sand. We need to touch the water. We need to get on a mountaintop. And I know that I always feel better, but let's talk about the food.
Okay. And to your question around what do we do with these kids that they're so addicted, basically kids and adults alike, addicted to the social media, the dopamine hits. And what do you do when your kids are going to be going to birthday parties and they're feeling ostracized? So just like how we got addicted to these things, what we do is we work backwards. So you make a negotiation with your kids. Okay, we're going to do 10 minutes less. We're going to do 20 minutes less, and we're going to replace it with this, because the brain is neuroplastic, meaning that it is malleable, even, especially during the first 7 years of life. Oh my goodness, the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton has very much elucidated that. So, but even in our adult years, we're still neuroplastic. So just like we built it, we can unbuild it. And it's by the practice of the practice. It's negotiating. It's smaller, and then you take a bigger bite and you get a longer time away. Get a longer time away. Oh, now we just spent a weekend away. Wow, we just went kayaking. We went, did stuff. We built, we had food on a fire pit, right? So we do it that way. So the second thing about the community and birthday parties and families, this is where mom power and dad power are super central. You start talking to the parents. You get together and just say, hey, we know what's going on. We know that America has 4% of the world's population. We use 70% of the world's ADHD medication. What is wrong with that picture? We know we're super drugging our kids. We know that there's a devolution of their executive functioning. And this is a long game if we do not address it. We're going to be living with it for the rest of our lives. We don't know what this pandemic is yet to trajectory, especially in these younger kids. So as a community, you get together and you say, moms, let's have a pre-meeting. Not everyone may be available or want to, but all you need is a little bit of a starter kit. And if you have a buddy that's saying, look, I'm going to do this. My kids, when we were growing up, instead of birthday cake, I made birthday crepes. I made birthday crepes that were gluten-free. Everybody got to make their crepes. It was a big hit. Instead of giving gifts and getting all jacked up, I partnered with Children's Hospital. And instead of my kids getting gifts, I had parents donate $5 and I put up the rest. And then I took these girls shopping and lined them up with a sick child for the gift that they were going to give them, and then write them a letter. That was so impactful that the parents started doing it all over our little mini ecosystem. So this is the power of one. We think if we're alone, we'll always be alone. That's not true. We are so powerful. And when we unite as parents, we can shift the tide. So super, super important. And my kids were very happy to be in their own ecosystem. And I led the way by the way I did my birthday parties and their birthday parties. It became like everybody wanted to come to our party.
I think now people are so much more aware of the relationship between food and health, because so many more people are sick, and you can't get away with what you were getting away with even just 5 years ago. I've talked about my parents quite a bit on this show because they never had a weight problem. They always thought I was super strange for even looking, at food in a different way. But now they're old and they're seeing things, the wheels fall off if
Yeah.
they don't, do things right. So it's affecting even the people that were extremely resilient.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to your question about food and how it affects the brain and the gut, well, I call food the alpha and the omega. We can get everything else right. We get the food wrong. We don't necessarily get it all right. Why is that so important? Well, I swim in the world of epigenetics. And food has the power to influence our genes. And even healthy foods have the power to influence our genes, healthy foods. And so we have to deconstruct what is a healthy food for us. And peanut butter, which is an American staple, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which is an American staple that goes, I would bet you a Weisenberger that at least 95% of every child going to school that either buys lunch or brings lunch has a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, that doesn't work anymore, people. We got to change the way we do that. Why is peanut butter so bad? Well, it's an oxalate. Oxalates have been linked to pandas. Oxalates, it's an oxalate, it's a mold, it's a mycotoxin, and it's also a carcinogen. So American peanuts are the devil on steroids, as I call them. Change it to a different nut butter. How does that affect your child? It's going to affect your child in its ability to learn, its ability to sit still, its ability to think about self-harm, ticking, either self-harm or harm to others. Peanut butter is really dangerous right now, especially with a big strep environment that we're having. Okay. That turns on all sorts of pathogens like strep candida, which then disrupts the neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin. It's the histamine response. We're looking at ADHD really tied to histamine. What are high histamine foods? Gosh, you guys, bananas could even be considered a high histamine, and even avocado, right? So if you have an allergy, if you're highly allergic, even bringing that banana to school may not be great. So you have to match your genetic blueprint to your current state of health. Now, it's much better to bring a banana than to bring Twizzle sticks, okay? So it's the continuum, right? Because Twizzle sticks has preservatives, which is also going to make their kids jump like Mexican, like little jumping beans in their seats. So how do we get around it? We start with getting our kids involved in how you prepare the food, how you buy the food, and even how you grow the food. When my kids were little, for the Easter bunny, we used to give them little seeds every year that they would grow and then nurture as a little sapling, as an herb, which then they would get to then plant in the summer. And then they would get to pick it, and then they bring it to the kitchen so that it could be used as a food source. That empowers children to be really involved in the process and also to have a much more open palate. So get the kids, this is back to nature. This also connects them to the earth. It gets them away from, the social media and the constant looking down on their phone. So it's really about starting small and starting in the kitchen and understanding, and you and I, Sara, have spoken about this a lot, understanding what foods no longer work. And the big four disruptors is, I've said many times on your show, dirty protein, those things that carry the amyloids, the oxalate burden, which disrupts our whole neurotransmission, the sulfur burden, which now, Sara, since last we spoke, I've linked it to impaired histamine response, to impaired salicylate response, which has a insulin response issue, and it also has a massive ADHD. So ADHD and hypoglycemia are now being linked to histamine. And sulfur, actually, there's an intersection with histamine and sulfur. So we've got to take a look at that. And then the last one is dirty fats, right? Those seed oils, the fats that we're making from the stress response. So those big four, understanding them and really being cognizant around it, can dramatically change the outcome of your mental health. Dramatically change the outcome of your mental health. I work with many kids that are ADHD, that are bipolar. I work with a lot of pandas. I just recently saw one of my graduates from Pandas. I've been working with him for a very long time. This child is now getting straight A's as a junior in high school. He's on the tennis team. He is such an authority of his body. through the pandemic, he did not get sick once last year as a sophomore in high school, where he's being, constantly ridden with all sorts of pathogens. He is a superhero of his body, and he's like a little superhuman. Yeah. And this was a child that was very sick. So this is the power to transform genes, to transform a body that in other ways he could have been incarcerated, or he could have put it into a psychiatric institution for the rest of his life, or for a very long period. And so that's how powerful, as parents and the community that surrounded him, can be. And that one child, this is the ripple effect. And I want to just really bring this to your attention, parents especially. They're saying, well, it's just my child, so I'll deal with it. It's just, we just got dealt a bad hand. No, it's not just your one child. If that one child makes a bad decision, because now we're talking mental illness at very heightened proportions.
Right.
We can have an event where that child does harm to one or too many, and then you have a ripple effect. And so it really is incumbent upon us as a society and as parents, as we get back to school, to say, what am I willing to do? And I can start small, and I can give my kids baby steps and micro bites of this, so then they can be part of the solution. But it's really, really important. Many layers to this, but it super can be done. And we also need to supplement. We can talk about supplements in a minute, but I feel very passionate about this. One of my legacy projects with my method is to bring back our kids.
Me too. I'm on that bandwagon, Teri. And as a mom, I'll just give you a little story. When my son was in 4th grade, and that's when he was diagnosed with leukemia, and he knew enough that he had to be really good with his diet. Like, there was no discussion. Thank goodness he was all on board. Whatever you say, Mom. But what I learned was, okay, come in the kitchen, you make your own lunch, because then they have buy-in, right? Yes. Absolutely. And he would come home and some of his lunch wouldn't be eaten. And I'd say, well, why didn't you eat it? He goes, Mom, at least I don't throw it away like every other one of my friends. They just throw their food away, and then the bullies take the little kids' food and the the Skittles and the cookies and all that stuff. And so I learned my kids, and they're not kids anymore, they're all adults. They do my marketing, not only because it's helpful for me and I need the help, but they're learning the cost of food. They're learning where the food is in the market and where the healthy foods are. And now that 2 of them are off to college, they know which, going to Whole Foods and going to Sprouts and going to the good places. And they know that I don't pay for alcohol. I don't pay for fast food or junk. I will absolutely pay for out to dinner if it's organic. And I make it a priority, because if the supplements don't work if the food's wrong. Right. And when you teach the kids from day one, and you moms of kids in elementary school, you are 1,000% in charge. They don't have the money. They're not making the money. And you know what else you're in charge of? You're in charge of this phone that you pay for. So if they're giving you a hard time, guess what goes away?
Right.
And this is their life, right? So use it to your advantage when they're young, and you get them in these good habits. And then you know what happens is, Halloween comes around, and I let my kids do whatever they want on Halloween. But the next morning, November 1st, they felt like, you know what? And I didn't have to say anything, because their bodies were overreacting to the junk, and they realized that that's why Mom tells me to eat the way I do. And it empowers them. And what's so crazy, and I have to just tell this quick story, is my daughter is now a freshman rowing at USC.
Wow.
Which has the most amazing athletic facility I've ever seen. For USC football and the programs, you can imagine all the money that's going into it. Wow. It's huge and state of the art. And they have the fridges there stocked with drinks and snacks and all this. Teri, you would have died. Their protein snack was like peanut butter and crackers in one of those processed foods little package. And I'm sitting here going, these are the elite
Right.
athletes, and this is what you're feeding them. And when we walked in, there was also a hurricane that was coming in California that never really turned into anything. But the moms of my daughter's roommates were all kind of, okay, well, then we need candles and, stock up the fridge with the breads and the cereals, and we can always just go back to good old PB&J. And I just go, oh, but they don't know any better. And we're talking about athletes. We're talking about people in their prime, in their best physical health that they will probably ever be. And these people don't know. And it's shocking, but yes, the kids, empower them when they're younger. They will feel the difference, especially now because the food supply is so messed up. But it's doable, and I did it. I've got 3 kids, all have three different profiles, different needs, different goals. And you take whatever their goal is, whether it's to do well in a sport, to get rid of their mood disorder and get off their drugs. No kid wants to be on drugs. You guys, your kid does not want to be on medication. And they want to take back the power. If you told them, hey, if you eat this way, you get to feel good when you go to school. You get to be confident, right?
Absolutely. And so what we now know is that these psychotropic drugs work about 1 out of 10 individuals. So that means 9 out of 10 are being drugged. And in some cases, those drugs can be deadly because if you have genetic polymorphisms that don't allow you to break down serotonin and you're put on a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, that is dangerous. That is dangerous. In my practice several years ago, it wasn't my client, but my client's friend, because she's in the 13, they doubled her Zoloft and she committed suicide the next day as a 13-year-old. So really, we have to take back the power as parents. So how do we know where to go? Well, there's a lot of information around genetics and pharmacotropics. It's called GeneSight, GenoMind. They will test your genetics against the pharmacological agents of ADHD, SNRIs, SSRIs. Every person that has administered any of those should have the ability to know what their genetics are and know what the red zone black box warnings are. This is not a Russian roulette human experiment. We have the technology. Let's use it, first and foremost. Secondly, we know that the body, again, the brain and the body is neuroplastic. What do we have to do with these children? We have to manage their sugar. If you have dysglycemia, if your insulin is dysregulated, if your glucose is dysregulated, you're not going to be able to learn. You will be anxious. You will be tired. You need 2 things for the brain. You need fat and you need sugar, but you need the right kinds because the brain is made up of 60%, up to 60% or almost 70% fat, and you need sugar to fuel that brain. But if you're eating Fruit Loops in the morning, which has got the preservatives, which doesn't have any fiber or good protein, and it has poison, basically, then you are setting your child up for failure. So do we really want to set up our children up for failure because they were mass marketed on television or on TikTok or whatever to say, wow, this is really cool? No, we need to be stronger than that. Let the kids, to your point, Sarah, let the kids make their choices. Insulin is super important. Histamine is super important. Antihistamines right now, the DAO enzyme, when you look at genetics, that's really related to ADHD. Taking a DAO enzyme. I had a child who was super ADHD, but I knew she was very, very smart. We put her on a DAO enzyme and she's now reading 4 grades above her reading level and she's sitting quietly in school. She had high histamine intolerance. We also took away the foods that were high in histamine. We had another little boy who was in 6th grade and was reading at a 3rd grade reading level. In his case, it was related to insulin not converting to testosterone. And when that happens, testosterone actually has been linked to dyslexia. Testosterone imbalance has been linked to dyslexia. Insulin and testosterone are related He was estrogen dominant. Within 6 months, he was reading six grades more, 6th grade reading levels more. These kids want to be smart. These kids want to be able to learn. And I don't want to use the word smart versus non-smart, but they want to be able to avail of what is in their cognition potential. But what we don't understand is we have the social fabric has created a whole lot of social disassociation. So let's get back into community. Let's invite, especially little ones, let's get them back together. Let's have them go walk outside. Let's make sure that the parents are uniting in community. We were broken apart as an ecosystem of the social fabric. Let's start making that a priority. Let's get the food right. And let's understand why our children are behaving or acting or experiencing life in a certain way, and then be advocates. We have many amino acids that are super important. L-theanine helps with dopamine and serotonin. 5-HTP is a serotonin precursor. Glycine is important for protein digestion, and it helps with serotonin. Taurine, again, will also help with dopamine. We have L-choline that helps with DNA methylation. It helps with fat metabolism and estrogen recycling, which also competes with serotonin. So we have all of these little helpers that can be used. My stress mover that I created, we'd have it used as young as 15 months. And it's been fantastic in the way
Can you, Teri, talk about the stress mover more? I do carry the stress mover on my store, and I know that personally I take it on a daily basis. I love it, but can you explain what's in it and how the mechanism behind it?
Yes. So stress mover, I'm very proud of that supplement that I formulated because it has a multiple fold action, and the people that have taken it have called it the chill pill, the God pill, the you can't be without it pill. So what I did was I first looked at Gene Smart approach to this supplementation and I created it for my daughter. Because she was having a lot of pituitary dysfunction due to a poisoning at a ballet conservatory. We put her into litter shock, and it completely dysregulated her endocrine system. So what this does is first it calms the HPA axis, that epinephrine, that fight or flight. And then it looks at how do we manage the histamine response. It's got a little bit of manganese in there. The fight or flight is with the phosphatidylserine that is non-soy based. And then we looked at L-glycine, which is a serotonin precursor, but also helps with digestion. We looked at rhodiola, which helps as an adrenal adaptogen. Okay, so we have taurine, rhodiola, manganese, glycine, and phosphatidylserine. So together, it has helped serve ADHD, candida, a histamine response. We had somebody with MCRS, mast cell reactivation syndrome, of 26 years. Within 6 weeks, it was gone. Mm-hmm. This helps on so many levels, and it puts out the fire, it lowers the histamine response, and it also manages the insulin indirectly, because when you're not pushing epinephrine, you're not putting in that fight or flight, blood sugar levels restabilize. We've had it used as young as 15 months to geriatric. Now, 15 months, we're going to use sprinkles, right? But it's helped with so many neurological, mood disorders, mania, OCD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, allergies, even candida and strep, because it puts out the fire of the fight or flight response that creates the dysfunction to begin with. Really, really very gentle. The only contraindication is if you have an MAOA gene where you can't break down serotonin, then that's not your match. But even those with polymorphisms, if there's a higher need for histamine balancing or protein balancing with the L-glycine, then you can still take it.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I take it on a daily basis. I wanted to touch back on, because we talked about all the kid food and the junk food, and that seems pretty obvious to a lot of people. But let's talk about the healthy wrong foods that could be, and you mentioned oxalates and you mentioned all the big four, but let's go through each one and how they could be causing mood issues. The wrong proteins, the sulfur, the oxalates, and the wrong fats.
Okay, absolutely. So This is my little soapbox. So I believe I'm pioneering in the world of amyloids and how it relates to our food supply and what it's doing to our metabolic actions in the body. So because of the crowding conditions and how we raise our animals in factory farms, they've developed in their tissues these indigestible proteins that turn on viral response. So we're seeing a big rise in autoimmunity, even more so during the pandemic because of what the spike protein does. It does the same thing. It has 7 vectors of amyloid fibrils. So it's making amyloid-like substances through the spike protein, and then we're eating them in our food supply. Why is that so important? Not only does it turn on viral reactivation, it makes us less able to digest protein. Why is that important? It's not only for building muscle. It has to do with amino acid utilization for glucogenesis, which means how we modulate our blood sugar. And again, what does the brain need? It needs the right amount of sugar. So if you're not breaking down your protein, you actually could be hypoglycemic and becoming anxious. And then you're turning on that viral load that has all these downstream impacts to all the conditions we just talked about, including mental health. The second one is oxalates. Why has that become such a big deal? Well, glyphosate.
Real quick. The amyloids are in chicken, pork.
Beef, chicken, beef, pork, and turkey. Thank you for that. If it's a factory farmed animal, run. The most studied is chicken. They've put in 10 chickens in an 11x8 piece of paper, right? They crowd them. The crowding, it's suggested that the crowding conditions is contributory to these indigestible proteins being formed in their tissues. And what we know is our multiple thousands of anecdotal outcomes show that when you lower the amyloid burden in the body heals. It's primordial to how we manage our overall wellness model because it has such massive downstream impacts, from viral reactivation to insulin dysregulation to coagulation, especially now in this COVID environment with the fibrils, to reactivating autoimmune or creating an autoimmune response. It's a very big gun. The next one are oxalates. These are healthy foods that for millennia we have been eating, but the glyphosate, the Roundup sprayed on our crops, made the bacteria that used to break down the oxalate burden from these healthy foods no longer breaker downable. And so again, what does COVID do? It increases the oxalate burden. So now we have even more oxalate problems. What are oxalates? They're found in berries. They're found in almonds. They're found in peanuts. They're found in certain beans. They're found in spinach and all those healthy greens, spinach and Swiss chard and okra, beets. We have a list. We have a list in our book and on our website and on our many of the outlets in which I speak, especially this one. And so why is that important? Oxalates will disrupt candida and strep, which is really linked to mental health. Oxalates feed the mold. Okay, mold is also linked to mental health. I've made a connection. One of our children in our practice was ticking. The ticking was from mold that was in the insoles of his shoes. Mm-hmm. And then he was eating moldy foods, which is exacerbating it. So mold will make oxalates. Oxalates feed mold. Oxalates then feed the disruption of dopamine and serotonin, which is our feel-good, executive functioning. How do I sleep at night? How do I wake up in the morning? This is really central. In PANS and PANDAS and autism, very linked to oxalate impairment. And so families were told, don't feed your children milk, get them almond milk or oat milk. Both are high in oxalates. That may not be your friend. Check your genetic blueprint and your current state of health. The third one is sulfur. Again, glyphosate came in and wiped our abilities to process sulfur. What is sulfur found in? It's found in cruciferous vegetables. It's found in egg yolks. It's found in many of our hot supplements right now, especially glutathione, and people are getting glutathione IVs and then they're going, great. Why is sulfur a problem? It turns on the CBS gene, one of the many sulfur genetics that has to do, I call it central broadcasting. has to do with neurotransmission, but it also has to do with histamine. Sulfur is now linked to histamine. Histamine is linked to ADHD. Histamine is linked to glucose and insulin impairment. I worked with a Navy SEAL who was a type 1 diabetic. Even with insulin, his blood sugars were in the 300s. Guess what? His diabetes was due to histamine response. As a Navy SEAL, he was always on high alert. Histamine's an excitatory neurotransmitter. We regulated his blood sugar by managing his insulin through the histamine and sulfur pathway. Okay. And then the last one are the dirty fats. And the dirty fats, the dirtiest fat is stress, right? I call it the dirty cupcake. Stress is going to dysregulate everything. We know it's deleterious to our immune system, to our mental health, to pathogenic reactivation, to leaking our gut. But then there are all these other bad fats as seed oils, as these nuts that carry all the other properties, as the hormones that we're taking on as women and even men that are all these bioidentical hormones or not even bioidentical that then put a real burden on our livers. And if our hormones can't be broken down, we can't make what we need to. One of the clients that I worked with was a gentleman at 33 who was deemed infertile. He even went to a big genetics company, an epigenetics company, and a fellowship with MDs. And based on his genetics, he was said, you can't break down fat, so we got to give you a lot of fat. Well, that was just making him worse. And so literally one visit with me, and he got his wife pregnant. Why? Because we had to unpack his fats. If we burden the body with the wrong kind of fats, or even fats that are healthy, but they're too big for our body's ability to assimilate them, it will disrupt hormone function. And hormones are linked to mental health. Again, estrogen, testosterone, and insulin and progesterone are all linked to mental health. So we've got to watch those, what I call dirty fats. This is all part of a platform that I have created and am shouting it from the rooftops because we have found that when we balance these four, especially in the world of COVID, the disrupted mirror effect is what I have deemed how the food supply of the big four and COVID, they do the exact same thing. They trip the genes of oxalates, histamine, insulin, protein, and fats, which is what these things do. And so now more than ever is important that we look at this disrupted mirror effect and adapt our food, our supplements, our pharmaceuticals, and our lifestyle to that which matches us. So we can get over the trajectory of what continues to be this ever-evolving thing that keeps popping up called the corona, right? Because it's not going away. And it's going to continue the devolution because the body's becoming weaker because we are tripping these genes. And this is why we're having this conversation about mental health, because that is one of the biggest things that has come of it, not only because of the social fabric, but because of these disruptors. And I will say that the spike protein also depleted GABA, which is a natural calmative in the neurotransmitter. And GABA has an impact when GABA is chewed up because the spike protein uses it. We can't, again, balance insulin. We can't balance testosterone. We can't balance estrogen. We're having people that are dysautonomic because they can't, their vasovagal response has gone, and that makes them even more anxious. They're passing out, which creates a high anxiety burden and actually just creates anxiety. So this is all critical in understanding that when we're eating to our genetic blueprint in our current state of health, we can rebalance anything. The body is neuroplastic. The body is very forgiving. And the body, when given the right things, even in the burden of all of these things that we have talked about, can be exceptionally brilliant and adaptive. It can be adaptive. And this is if to take one thing away from this podcast is we are adaptive species, and there's plasticity. If we can adapt, if we choose to adapt, the body will follow, and the children will follow, and our communities will follow. And then that kid that has that birthday cake with all that frosting and all the food dyes and all the bad stuff may be the minority instead of the majority. And I think we can right that ship. I know we can.
Absolutely. When I first met with you, Teri, and I know I've told you this, within 2 days of getting off of the sulfurs, I felt like $1,000,000. And I'm like, you tell me to eat cardboard and I will if I can feel like this. And I think most people would say that they don't even know how numb they are. They don't know that they're so sick. And so this is just a starting point. I know a lot of this might be over your heads as you're listening, everybody. That's why you need to join my free group coaching, because I incorporate Teri's methodology in my coaching. And that's where I come up with the food list and everything. I wanted to just mention a couple of the supplements that I carry that I've seen get people off of their medication for ADHD, anxiety drugs, depression drugs, with the guidance of their doctor, of course. And that is the Cognoblast. It's been amazing. People that are not big supplement people, but willing to try something. And oh, by the way, Sara, did I tell you that I've been on a medication for 20 years and this is the only supplement that's gotten me off? The second one is the acceleradine iodine, because iodine deficiency is the #1 predictor for depression. And even my own mom, who I mentioned never had health issues in her life, never been on a diet. I told her she had to take the iodine. She said, Sara, it's really weird. My brain fog's gone. I go, imagine that. And by the way, she started eating wild meat and getting rid of all the junk food that she was eating. So this stuff works, whatever age you are. We've talked a lot about the kids, but even the elderly population. And it's the people you love. You want them to be doing what we're talking about because you benefit in your relationship with them, right? If my kids are eating right, they're going to love me and be nice to me. And I hear a lot of parents complain that they can't even get their kids to the dinner table and they just shut their door and they have no relationship with their teenagers. And I'm sitting here going, well, I don't understand that, because I always go back to this. You're still in charge of this. You're paying for the phone bill. And you are in charge as long as they are under your rooftop, or even maybe when they're in college and you're paying for the tuition, you are in charge. So encourage, give the education. And Teri, we will for sure have to have you back on, because you are so full of amazing knowledge, and there's always something new because you're always wanting to find the next thing. And this is in our world, the threats are just coming, and we are going into flu season, and we've seen it all in the news, you guys. I'm not going to talk about it, but you've already seen it. They've already approved the next thing. We've got, are we going to be masking up again? Let's just think about what Teri talked about with community, right? And where does the mask come? I can tell you, during the mask scenario a couple of years ago, one of my children liked it. Why? Because she didn't have to smile or be around people. Mm-hmm. That's not good. That is not a good sign. So, Teri, we've got a minute left. Is there anything that we're missing here?
Well, I think really back to the power of one. You think that you're alone, but you're not. I mean, I was a one, you're a one. It only takes one. It takes one to make a beautiful ripple effect, or it can take one to create a ripple effect that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. And so don't feel disempowered. Really own the power of one to make a difference. And you can start small. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, but starting makes the catalyzer.
Right. And how can you start right now? You can share this episode with at least 3 of your friends. That's easy. Copy and paste the link and shoot a text on that phone that is in your left hand. I know it is at this moment, right? So anyway, well, thank you, Teri. As always, love being with you. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. If I can help you with your health issues, you can contact me directly through the website, sarabantahealth.com. happy to put together a protocol for you, and exciting to announce that when you go on the website, you can actually take a quiz to figure out what the best cleanse is for you if you're up for it. Also, join the free group coaching on Telegram. There is no downside, costs nothing, and the link is below. I teach you on a daily basis, and you can ask questions about what Teri and I have talked about, and I teach a lot of what she is talking about today. And you will be a part of a like-minded group to support you on your journey, so you don't feel alone in this journey that we are all on, facing all of these big threats that seem so overwhelming. Just put one foot in front of the other, and we're going to get through it. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and radio show. And like I mentioned, my goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with this goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help and Teri's help. You can find Teri's link in the description below as well. And check out her book, Wildatarian. It's phenomenal. It's easy to read, and it gives you a real understanding of why we need to go back to nature with the food and the way nature is intended. Join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. You can use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide at sarabantahealth.com. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great week.